gentlemen, welcome to Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for March 2nd, 2021. I call this meeting to order and again ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Carbonaro?
Present.
Daney?
Here.
Gansey? Here. Hopkins?
Here.
Ranky?
Present.
Sawansky? Here. President Wallace?
Here. First item on our agenda this evening is under Community and Economic Development. Chairman Gansey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The item we have is a beta application from Techies Computer and Gadget Repair. So they've been in the Bartlett Orchard Shopping Center for 13 years. They were previously a home base, and when they grew, they got their commercial location. Owners Brian Koch and Brandy Bowie purchased a more affordable sign and basic build out of the space. They have plans to remodel the interior and upgrade their sign as a further investment into their thriving business. Since the signage is eligible expense for the VITA program, the staff recommends a $1,000 grant based upon the proposed $3,700 to be spent to upgrade the sign. And so we're looking for any discussion on the VITA grant for Techies.
I don't see any problems with it.
No.
Anybody have any problems with Techies' application?
Not at all.
No.
Nope.
All right, so we'll forward the grant for final vote at the upcoming village board meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Gansey. Next item we have on our committee this evening is Finance and Golf Committee. Chairman Daney.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only item we have on our agenda is the 2021-2022 proposed budget review. Police Planning and Development Administration. Todd, are you ready, sir?
So last week we went over the brief overview. This week we're going to have each department. We're going to have three departments plus professional services go through their department with a summary, their highlights, goals, and then down to the detail as regard to personnel, equipment purchases, vehicle purchases, and that kind of thing. So we'll go through those operating funds, and we'll go from there. First up is the police department.
Thanks, Todd. Good evening, everyone. It's our pleasure to be present to present the police department's 21-22 budget tonight. I'm joined by my deputy chiefs, Jim Durbin and Jeff Berkelis, and also in the back we have Sergeant Kyle Rybaski and Commander Will Nadenoff. So I'll start off by going through our department summary. And in 21-22, our budget has increased by 5%, and that increase is attributed to a request to add 2 additional police officers, as well as increased DUCOM fees and pension obligations. We're also asking for the addition of 2 police officers that will enable the department to maintain our minimum staffing shifts in spite of anticipated retirements, and is also a continuation of our hiring plan that was proposed to the village board prior to our fiscal year 2021 budget. A portion of the cost of hiring the new officers, so a new squad car, equipment fees for that car, and academy fees can be offset by utilizing equitable sharing funds for eligible expenses. For anyone who's not familiar with what equitable sharing funds are, is we have a police officer who is attached to a DEA task force, and when they seize money related to drug transactions, we receive a portion of those funds. And so we can only use those funds for specific purposes, some of those being training, and one of the main things is to purchase equipment. So the budget includes $141,900 in equitable sharing funds, and some of those expenses are in capital, which includes a new squad car for the 2 new officers we're asking for, the equipment to outfit that squad car, 4 new portable radios, and the equipment necessary to go with those radios, and then a LEADS law enforcement interface. So that is the computer system we use through the state to run driver's licenses, license plates, and things like that. That interface will go right from the LEADS database and import that information into a police report, which will negate double entry, it'll save time, and just allow greater efficiency for the police officers. Another major expense that's being paid for with equitable sharing funds is academy fees for our police academy. We anticipate 7 openings during the course of the next fiscal year, and we have to pay for those openings, and then we apply for reimbursement through the state. If we do get reimbursed from the state for those expenses, that money has to be returned to the Equitable Sharing Fund if we use those funds for that purpose. One of the new things that we're looking at implementing is getting a comfort dog for our police department. This is something that we've been talking about for several years, and we've been working with a local 501c3 company called Comfort, I just lost the name of it, Canines for Comfort, thank you. They're out of Grays Lake. So they're willing to provide a trained dog to us, as well as all the training and the initial equipment, kennel, toys, shots for the dog, and then we would use that dog to benefit the community. So some uses we would look at is community relations, and that's one of the things I think we're missing with the police canine, because it's trained as an aggression dog, and everybody wants to pet the dog and interact with the dog, and you can't do that with that type of dog, but with a comfort dog you can. So we would use it for community relations. We'd use it for aiding investigations where a child is a victim of abuse. We'd use it for critical incident mental health support and stress management with our staff. The other difference is our police canine goes home with its handler. It has one primary handler. We would have several primary handlers trained with a comfort dog, and then they would be able to train other department staff so that any trained department member could utilize the dog 24/7. The dog would live at the police station, it would be cared for by our staff, and we think it would be a great benefit for the community. Additionally, when I talked to IRMA about whether they would insure the dog, and they said they would, if the dog would happen to bite somebody or whatever, and they were intrigued by the program and were really interested to see how that goes. The other thing we're looking at implementing is a contractual part-time social worker. So this is another concept we've been exploring for several years due to the number of mental health calls we receive, as well as the time it takes to follow up on them and identify resources for those in need. In a recent article in Command Magazine, Illinois Chiefs of Police Association did a survey, and through that survey they found that most departments find that having an on-site or on-call social worker enhances the overall collaborative outreach of a department to the community. So some of the challenges we have is that anytime there's a mental health call and we have to try and work with that person to identify services, it's difficult to identify who exactly to go to. One of the main facts is being in 3 different counties. So we've got Cook County, Kane County, DuPage County. They each have their own mental health services units and different services. So having everything under one social worker that's familiar with all of those services would take some of the burden off police officers in trying to track down the services, spend time with people, and that would free them and the supervisors up to do other things. The social worker would also be based out of the police department, but would work with other village departments as necessary. Moving on. Obviously, the last year has been a major challenge with us for many different reasons, the first being COVID. So when COVID took hold, one of the things that we take most pride in is helping organize and participating in community events. And since we weren't able to host those, we had to change the way we were doing things. So National Night Out is a prime example of something we had to modify. Working with the village and other taxing bodies to come up with the booth drive-through was something that we did. So even though we were restricted, we still tried to find ways that we could do interactive things with the community, but do them in a safe way. Another thing you've heard me talk about with staffing is we're working on our succession planning. So we have a training committee that's devising a plan to create training tracks to further develop career opportunities and skills for civilians and officers, as well as supervisors and other department members. We also were tasked with having a police officer test in the summer, which happened after COVID began and right after the George Floyd incident in Minnesota and some of the other incidents. And I was a little concerned about whether we were going to get people to apply, much less take the test. So on top of that, due to COVID restrictions, we had to get away from our traditional testing process, which was a mandatory orientation followed by an in-person written exam. And we were notified that the sites that we would host it at would not allow us to do that, so we had to come up with a different way of doing it. So what we did is we put a lot of information onto a recruitment website that we started, which is joinbartlettpd.org, and we sent everybody there to find out information about our department as well as the village website. And then we hosted a online written test. Because it was an online test and still needed to be proctored, the testing agency limited it to like 10 to 15 participants per session. So those sessions were broken out over several days, and I think even several weeks. And I think it worked out to our benefit because, number one, we weren't competing against other police departments that were testing on the same day, which is what we ran into in the past. And, you know, in those instances, we're all competing for the same small pool of candidates. So we got more candidates to take our test, even given the year that we've had. Actually, we had 50% more candidates take our test this year than we did in 2018. So I would say that was a major success, and we're going to look to continue that type of process in the future. Another thing we saw during COVID was we had to change some of our operations, but one of the major things we noticed was although there were less vehicles on the roadway, people were driving way faster than they should have been. So we invested a lot of our time into the Lake and 59 corridors as well as others, targeting those high speeding offenses. And during the year total, we made 359 arrests for aggravated speeding. 348 of those arrests were for Class B misdemeanors, which is 25 to 34 miles over the speed limit. And then Class A misdemeanors is anything over 35 miles an hour. We made 11 of those arrests for 35 miles an hour or more over the speed limit. I'm also happy to say that during that time, we didn't have any fatalities on those roadways, but we did have officers whose vehicles were struck while they were out there doing those enforcement activities. And you may have noticed on the rear of our squads, we put some chevrons to make them more visible. But I think 3 of the 4 people that hit those squads were under the influence of drugs and or alcohol, and 1 was possibly distracted as well. So just reaffirms the need that we need to continue to be out there enforcing those traffic laws.
Chief, are we able to recoup the cost of replacing those vehicles from the drivers?
I don't know. So what happens is we submit a claim to IRMA, and then I think IRMA could look for some type of subrogation to go after their insurance companies. But a lot of times the judges have an ability to order restitution too, so that's kind of up to the judges. With all the protests and demands for police reform throughout the summer, we sent 2 of our department members to get certified in order to teach our staff fair and impartial policing. So that's coming up, I think in March. They'll be training our whole department in fair and impartial policing. And then also this fall, we had Caliber Press come in, and they trained our entire department on implicit bias training. We also, because of COVID, we were eligible to submit for reimbursement for certain expenses through DuPage and Cook counties as well as FEMA. So our staff worked with village staff and accounted for a $1,268,000 reimbursement from DuPage County and a $144,000 reimbursement from Cook County. And we also worked really hard at obtaining cleaning supplies and PPE, and people were coming to us left and right making donations to the point where we had a lot of it. And there were other people and businesses in need in the community, so we turned around and provided some of those PPE and cleaning supplies to them as well. So it was really a team effort. And then I talked a little bit about our recruitment and testing process. Out of that process, we were able to increase the diversity of our staff. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is you have to recruit a diverse group of candidates. They have to score well enough to place highly enough on the list, and then statutorily we have to hire based off of how people scored and their rank on the list. And out of this last group, 3 of the 5 officers are female, which brings the total number of female officers on our department to 13, or 22%. We also promoted a female sergeant within the last year, so 12% of our supervisors are now female. And then out of those new officers, one is Muslim and is our first Muslim officer, and one is Indian and is our first Indian officer. And so we feel that now we're more representative of our community. That's something we're proud of. We also worked really hard to update our policies this year, especially our use of force policy, in order to address chokeholds, de-escalation tactics, and duty to intervene. And President Trump made a requirement of all police departments that they had to have their use of force policy certified by a certifying body. So in Illinois, it could be through Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, or CALEA is also a certifying body. We made those changes to our use of force report. We submitted it to CALEA, and in December we received certification from CALEA that our use of force policy meets those standards. So the important thing for us is that keeps us eligible to be able to continue to receive federal grant funding. We also formed a committee to explore implementing body cameras, so that's kind of in the works right now. And then throughout the year, we applied for 4 different grants through IRMA. They were for accreditation fees, ballistic helmets, PPE expenses, and implicit bias training, and we did receive all 4 of those grants. Grants are something we continue to look to in order to supplant the funding for our department. So moving on to our police summary, really the only change in our police summary as far as staff goes is we're asking for the 2 additional police officers. So you see the number of police officers increased from 46 to 48, and then our total full-time equivalents increased from 77 to 79. Looking at our services over the last year, you'll see our estimates for services and activities have jumped from 2019 to 20 and then 20 to 21. Even though we were in the middle of a pandemic, we still were pretty busy, and we expect that to continue in 21-22 with a slight increase in activities and services. Traffic enforcement, again, that's one of our highest priorities. It's one of the biggest complaints that we receive, so we expect that we'll be busy with traffic enforcement activities this coming year, so we budgeted for an increase there. Training hours, that's something that one area we were negatively impacted due to COVID. We weren't able to get together. A lot of the training bodies canceled training, so our training hours were way down this year. Historically, we average about 10,000 hours of training a year. We're anticipating getting back up to that amount in 21-22. And then FOIA requests have really increased since 2019-20. So you'll see about we had an increase of 1,000 FOIA requests from 1920 to 2021, and then we're expecting that trend to continue in 21-22.
What do you contribute that to?
I think mostly, a few years ago when I was talking to you about the projected need to get back our staffing and records as well as our investigation secretary, that was one of the main reasons. The law changed regarding expungements, especially with cannabis offenses and juvenile offenses. So we had to put a lot of effort into responding to people are filing FOIA requests to find out if their record has been expunged as it should have been. So I think that's part of that increase. And then really everything that's gone on in society, people are requesting our policies and general orders to find out what they are. Moving on to the personnel request detail, this is where I show the addition of the 2 police officers. They're broken out, 1 police officer on each line. And this year, again, we are anticipating 4 retirements that I know of, kind of spread out sporadically throughout the year. I also have 1 officer out on a disability right now, so that's part of that reason. Moving on to capital outlay. So again, we're asking for 4 patrol vehicles this year out of the Vehicle Replacement Fund. All 4 of those vehicles have met the criteria on our vehicle replacement evaluation form. 2 are 2016s and 2 are 2017s. 3 of them currently have over 100,000 miles on them, and 1 has close to 100,000 miles on it. And they're anticipated, obviously, to have even higher mileage at the time that the vehicles actually come in to replace them. Number 2 is an additional patrol vehicle. This would be a new patrol vehicle for the 2 new officers I'm requesting, and that would be funded out of the Equitable Sharing Fund that we discussed earlier. And number 3 is the equipment for that vehicle, also funded out of the Equitable Sharing Fund. That's the light bar, prisoner cage, radio, all the lights, et cetera. Number 4 is a court liaison vehicle. It is I have the year on here, but it is projected to have 100 to 105,000 miles at the time of replacement. It also met the criteria on the vehicle replacement guideline evaluation form, would be funded out of vehicle replacement fund. Number 5 is portable radios. Those are the ones we wear on our hips that we talk through. 2 of those are needed for the 2 new officers, and then the 2 will be kept as spares, and then if I request the additional 2 officers as part of the finalization of the hiring plan in the next year's budget, those would be issued to those officers as well. And then number 6 is the equipment needed for those radios, the microphones that get attached to them, belt clips, antennas, and some replacement batteries. Number 7 is our tasers. So currently we have 27 tasers and are now down to 20. 7 of them need repairs and they're no longer able to be repaired. So we're asking to replace the 7 tasers that we're down to get back up from 20 to 27 tasers. Number 8 is AEDs, automated external defibrillators. So these would replace old discontinued AEDs. Every patrol officer and CSO that's on duty on the street carries a medical bag with an AED in the medical bag. Since 2015, we've saved 10 lives through using the AEDs. Number 9 is portable breath tests. So we have 5 units that are utilized by patrol and are all 12 years old. The recommendation is to update them to a newer model in order to ensure more accurate results during DUI investigations. Number 10 is that LEADS interface I was talking about that will interface with our records management system, eliminating double entry and improving efficiency. That will be funded out of the Equitable Sharing Fund. Number 11 is CPR mannequins. So every year we do CPR and first aid training for our staff. We also do it for the Teen and Citizen Police Academy participants. And there's been a change in the law that now requires CPR mannequins to register the number of compressions that are being done in order to obtain certification. So we're looking to replace our current mannequins with the new mannequins that'll help us meet that standard.
Let me stop you there, Chief. You need 16 of those mannequins.
Yes.
Are you going to have a class with 16 people in it?
We do. So normally we fill the training class. So we have a staff of 75 people. We train all of our sworn staff and civilian staff in CPR and first aid. So usually those training classes are about 25 people. It's an all-day class. Everybody utilizes a mannequin and does their own compressions to get certified.
Okay. Thank you.
Number 12 is a pole camera. It's used to monitor 2 locations remotely at a time. We use these in public areas where we're having car burglaries and things like that. We're looking to purchase 16 stand-up workstations as a healthier option for people who sit at their desks to work at all day. And then number 14 are some deer cameras. We also use those as types of surveillance. We use them at Public Works earlier this year. They take still photos, not video. When we were having kids get into the Public Works facility during the evening hours, we've used them on the golf course to try and identify people doing damage out there. Number 15 is a RAP personal restraint system. What these do is when somebody's having a mental health crisis or is otherwise taken into custody and is violent, it's like a Velcro thing that wraps around their legs and then also their upper body so they can't flail or kick. It also seats them in an upright position because one of the things that happens when people die in custody is that they're left on their stomach or on their chest with their hands handcuffed behind their back, and then due to positional asphyxia, it affects their ability to breathe. So then, unfortunately, in some instances, they die. This will help prevent that because it gets somebody up into a seated position, and that's also the way we're trained when we take people into custody, is get them into a seated position as soon as possible. In the past, we've also had people kick out squad car windows or kick the squad car door so hard that it bent the frame. This will prevent that from happening as well. Number 16 is a rowing machine. We're looking to replace an old rowing machine in our fitness room. Part of that machine does not work anymore, so we're looking to replace it due to age and wear. And then number 17 are a couple of police bicycles. They are electric powered that would replace 2 bikes that are 10 years old and in disrepair. One of the things that officers have been doing throughout the summer is putting a bike on the back of their squad car, a patrol officer, and going out and riding through neighborhoods. The issue is that if they they're still responsible to answer calls. And if they're away from their car too far, it takes them a little while to ride back to their car. These have an electric motor assist so that if they need to get back to their car a little quicker, they can get back to the car, throw the bike on the bike rack, and then go on to whatever call they have to go handle. So that's it for our capital outlay request. $185,000 of that is vehicle replacement. $96,000 of it is from equitable sharing funds, and the rest is $38,000 for capital expenses. Any questions before I move on?
You talk about the vehicle replacement. Is that consistent with our board policy that we've set of 3 to 4 years, I think?
Yeah, so several years ago, we implemented a program that Oswego used. They have a vehicle replacement evaluation form that takes into account mileage, damage, engine idling hours, and maintenance costs. And so there's a scoring sheet, and I actually have them. I could read off what the scoring is. So for one of the vehicles, if it comes up as under 18 points, that would be excellent. 18 to 22 points would be good. 23 to 27 points qualifies for replacement, and above 28 points would be a high priority replacement. So the first squad currently has 108,000 miles on it, and the total overall score is 39, with 28 being high priority replacement. So it's well over that amount. The second one has 101,000 miles on it. That score is 30, and it's also had $7,000 in maintenance. The third squad has 104,000 miles currently. It's had about $3,000 in maintenance, and the overall score is a 36. And then the last squad currently has 93,000 miles, has had $4,000 in maintenance, and scores a 31. So the balance is trying to stay ahead of everything coming due at one time. Also the maintenance that's going into it, as well as the resale that we try and get out of them when we retire them.
Let's talk a little bit about the Comfort Dog. I know we're getting the Comfort Dog for free and we're getting the training, but I'm assuming there's going to be some cost involved with having that dog over the years.
So we'd have to purchase a village dog tag for it. We would have to buy food and occasional veterinarian fees. But other than that, I don't foresee a whole lot of expense with having to maintain that dog. I may have to go to the veterinary clinic for a bath or something every couple months or whatever, and nail clipping, but other than that and food, I don't see a whole lot of expenses that would be entailed with that dog.
I think we estimated between $300 and $450 annually for all of that.
Is there going to be a stipend for the staff people who take care of the dog when the dog's here? No? Or stipend for reimbursement for the training or anything?
No, the only thing that we would have, obviously we have to pay them for if they go to training, if it's their day off or whatever, we would have to pay them overtime for that. But it's not like a police canine that has to be consistently trained every month on drug recognition and stuff like that. So we may have to take it back up there for occasional training, but it's not going to be like an every month thing, except for the initial training, which I think is 12 weeks.
And then for the social worker, are you planning to go out to an RFP or do you have someone in mind?
We had talked to a couple different departments. We explored whether there would be any grants available through the counties. We didn't find any. Roselle is one of the departments we talked to. They have one full-time and one part-time social worker. They contracted with DuPage County. DuPage County told us that they can't commit to anything because there's such a demand for social workers right now, and then they would have to charge us whatever the going rate for social workers was. So then we reached out to St. Charles Police Department. They also have a full-time and a part-time social worker as well, and they contract it through an agency. So we talked to that agency, we determined how much it would be, and they said that they would be able to provide us with a social worker that meets the criteria if we were able to go that route.
Could you kind of give us, like a day-to-day synopsis of what this social worker would do?
Yeah, so I anticipate in looking at some of our activities that they would engage in some case review. They could hopefully decrease the need for police services, because if people are getting the care and the follow-up care that they need, maybe we're not getting recalled or dispatched to their homes for continuing incidents. Reduce the potential for repeated police contacts and increase self-advocacy without a uniformed presence. It would also provide victim advocacy, mental health support, intervention of referrals for addiction, homelessness, domestic violence, family struggles, and safety planning, assistance with obtaining orders of protection, court accompaniment, and community referrals, as well as maintain a direct connection with the referring officers and detectives. It would also promote faster connections to resources and increased rapport, follow-up and lines of communication between the agency and the residents, and it would result in officers and supervisors being able to spend more time on other patrol duties. So in the communities where we've reached out to, Lake in the Hills, St. Charles, Hanover Park, Carroll Stream, Streamwood, they all say that their social worker program has been invaluable and has really been an asset to the community, and has also helped officers be freed up to do the routine activities that we expect them to be doing.
You email us to let us know if these other municipalities use contract social workers or if they have full-time in-house staff working for the municipality.
Yeah, we could take a look at that. I know that St. Charles is contract, because that's specifically what we looked at. Roselle was able to get a grant through DuPage County, so that's how they got theirs. But we can look into some of the other communities too and find out what theirs are.
Thank you.
Is the other communities that you mentioned, do they work with one part-time social worker, or do they have multiple social workers? Or
it depends.
It seems like a lot of responsibility that you listed off there for someone who's working part-time.
It depends on the department. I think a lot of them started off with a part-time person and kind of tried to see how the duties would progress, and they found that they're in such demand that they've brought on not only a full-time but a part-time as well, and some have multiple full-time people, I believe. But I'll include that in the kind of the survey that we do with other agencies and find that out for you.
Can you explain to me a little bit about the pole camera again?
Sure. So the pole camera is a camera that gets mounted to a pole, basically in an area, normally a light pole or whatever, and helps us, allows us to view the camera remotely. So it's got to be in a public area unless it's on private property, then we could have consent, but it can't record anybody that has an expectation of privacy without a warrant or consent. So a lot of times with car thefts we've been having, or if there's vehicle burglaries in a certain area, we can put it up on a pole, and then it records to a DVR, and if something happens, we can go back through that video and see if we can capture video of the suspect vehicle, license plate, something like that.
So it's not permanently attached. You can move it.
Yes.
Depending on the need.
Yes.
What is something you felt you had to leave off the budget this year to make room for something else?
If there was something I thought I needed, I would put it in here. No, we don't ask for things that we don't think we need. So, everything on here that we thought was pertinent to what we need to do our jobs.
I meant more like what didn't you, maybe something else that you think is pertinent but just couldn't fit into the budget number you were looking at?
Can you think of anything? I can't. So what, part of our process is, and part of our succession planning is I gather my whole command staff when we sit down to put our budget together, and we start to have these discussions, and people say, I think we need this, I think we need this, and if we agree that we need it, we put it in. If there's some disagreement about whether we need it or not, we leave it out. So they talk to their staff about it, they bring us those ideas, and that's kind of how we put our budget together.
Great.
Chief, you're going to add two new officers in 2021, is that correct?
That's correct. So the hiring process or the hiring plan that I spoke to the board about a couple years ago was kind of a three-step process. It was hiring the 3 in the current budget year, asking for 2 more in 21-22, and then 2 more in 22-23. Part of the reasoning is we were behind. We were the lowest of comparable communities in number of officers per 1,000 residents, and so we wanted to boost our staffing as well as our minimum patrol shift staffing, as well as be able to deal with the looming retirements that we know are coming and are here as we speak, and the amount of time it takes to hire officers, train officers through the academy, field training, so on and so forth, because it's not as easy as somebody leaving and just replacing them the next day with somebody else. We have to continue to be able to make sure we can protect the community and that we have staff available to fill in when we have those vacancies.
Chief, that time frame's about a year, right?
About a year.
Outstanding. And how many people do you anticipate are going to be retiring this year?
4 that I know of right now. There's more that are eligible. It just depends on if the timing is right for them. I know that a lot of departments are having people leave because of everything going on with demands for police reform and some of the bills that have been proposed. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Right. So in the next year, you could be behind the 8 ball again.
We could be, but we're trying to stay in front of it through this process.
Thank you.
How long of a time period does it take between hiring and bringing somebody onto with all the training?
It can be about a year. So once we know we're going to have an opening, we start a background process. And then, that's interviewing neighbors, interviewing the person, looking into their background. And then, there's a polygraph test that we have to have them take. And then the background investigation is put together. Then we present those to the Fire and Police Commission because they actually authorize us to hire people. They're the hiring authority. And some of the issues we've run into is we are ready to offer a job to somebody, and then they take another community's position. And then we're back to starting all over again. So we're starting to do multiple backgrounds at a time now so we don't get stuck in that type of instance with relying on one person and then them taking a job somewhere else. Or we've had them say, you know what, I just decided I don't want to be a police officer anymore. So those are some of the hard things that we've had to deal with. We've learned some lessons over the years, and so we try and stay in front of that as well.
Thank you.
Could you also provide us the starting salaries of the surrounding communities?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to professional development. Not a lot of changes in our professional development for the next fiscal year. Some of the conferences I'll highlight, I'm not sure if they'll happen. They didn't happen this year, but one of the ones we always send our accreditation manager to is the CALIA conference, which is expected to be held in Jacksonville, Florida in November. And then we're planning on attending the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference in New Orleans in September. Myself, a deputy chief, a sergeant, and a detective. And the reason I have 4 people budgeted to go to that conference is we submitted the Bartlett Community Care Collective as a potential program to present at the conference. So I would want Sergeant Crowley and Detective Johnson to be present because they were part of putting the whole thing together, and they would actually be the presenters for that program. The INIA Drug, Terrorist, and Criminal Interdiction Conference is the conference that our officer who's assigned to the DEA has to go to every year. This year it's anticipated to be in San Diego in June. I'm not too sure that that one's going to happen. And then, you know, we've got several new command staff members this year, so I'd like to do a team building exercise, especially because I anticipate a couple of the retirements this year to be supervisors, so we'll be bringing on some additional new command officers. Deputy Chief Durbin and Deputy Chief Perkelis were slated to go to Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Police, which is a prestigious command staff school. They were slated to go last year. They're slated to go again this year. The funds have already been paid for, and so the expense that you see here is for travel expenses for that class if it happens. And then another new class, we're looking at instituting a master firearms instructor. We've had a couple over the years, and since our last master firearms instructor retired, we haven't trained anybody else in that, so we're looking to get a new master firearms instructor. That training would be in Champaign at U of I from sometime in the summer or fall. And then, like I said, the other major expense we have in professional development that started last year that we hadn't had in previous years is we now have to pay for our police academy expenses. In the past, ILETSB, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, would pay for those, and we didn't have to budget for them. But because of funding issues, they are no longer able to do that. So we pay for them out of our budget, and then we submit paperwork to request reimbursement if the funds are available. So we're anticipating 7 positions that I know of right now at about $6,500 per recruit, and that would all be paid for out of our equitable sharing fund. Any questions on professional development? Okay, moving on to professional association. Pretty much everything in professional association remains the same as last year. There are a couple new entries. One is for Detective Cianco, who is a certified arson investigator, to become a member of the National Association of Fire Investigators for $55 for the year. And then Sergeant Tom Alagna, who runs our Citizens Police Academy, is requesting to become a member of the National Citizens Police Academy Association for $35 a year. Everything else remains the same from the prior year. Any questions about professional association? Okay, moving on to line items. So in our line item summary, regular salaries have gone up 5%, and mainly due to the addition of 2 new officers. And then many of our line items have either had no change or have seen a decrease. So service agreements is down 4%. One of the things we did is we replaced our scheduling system, which resulted in a cost savings. That's why we see that reduction there. As far as advertising goes, that's down 40% because we don't have to advertise for a police officer test this year. Impounding animals is down 50%. Normally, when we impound animals, obviously here we have to pay for blankets and food when they're impounded here. But if in the event that we have to take them to DuPage County Animal Control, we have to pay them for any expenses down there as well. We have seen a reduction in the need to pay for those types of costs, so that accounts for that decrease. Communications, DUCOM, that's our dispatch center. There's a 3% increase there. Vehicle maintenance, we're expecting a 5% increase because with the aging of our vehicles, we're seeing an increased need for maintenance on them. And then vehicle setup is up 33% because we're setting up more vehicles, or we're asking to purchase more vehicles this year, which results in more setup costs. Materials and supplies went up 5%, and that's, we have a need to purchase more citations. That's what that expense is for. Uniforms are up because ballistic vest replacements are due this year. And those ballistic vest replacements, we always apply for a grant and we get it, but it's always hard to anticipate how much it'll increase or decrease every year because it all depends on the shelf life of the vest, when people get hired and when they retire. So each ballistic vest has a expiration of 3 years or 5 years, I think. So they would get replaced every 5 years, and that's what we budget for. Postage is down about 15% because most of our required expungements have taken place, and we have to send out less expungement notifications. And then equipment maintenance materials is down about 10% due to a reduction in radar repair costs. Professional development is up about 7% due to the additional people I'm looking to send to the International Chiefs of Police Conference, as well as getting somebody certified as a master's firearms instructor. Our safety program expenses are down because we eliminated some gas mask and CPR and first aid fees aren't required this year. Police and Fire Commission is down about 45%. This was a rare year in which we had a police officer exam and a sergeant's exam occur in the same year. Police officer exams occur every 2 years. Sergeant exams occur every 3. And this was just one of the odd years where they both were due to fall in the same year. Equitable sharing is down about 20% because we're requesting less equipment purchases through equitable sharing. And then our transfer to police pension is up about 20% due to increased pension contributions. Unless anybody has any specific questions about line items, that does it for my budget presentation. Other questions? Okay, we'll work on getting answers to the questions that you posed to me tonight, and then I'll send out an email to Paula to forward on to the board.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, Planning and Development Services. We are the department that handles all types of development and construction in the village, from a large industrial 400,000 square foot building all the way down to a beehive. They all require permits, they require a plan review, and they require inspections. That's what we do. This year, the Planning and Development Services Department is proposed to increase by 4%. We are asking for no new positions and no vehicles. As you know, development and home improvement projects have increased substantially over the past year because of COVID. And with the implementation of the new permit tracking system during the same time period, the Planning Division has been unable to continue with the update to the zoning ordinance. We have completed 5 chapters of the existing 14 and have which the board has reviewed and approved, and staff has completed the commercial chapter in draft form, but the recently adopted form-based code overlay needs to be referenced as part of this chapter. So therefore, following the long-term routine goals established by the board, under examining service delivery methods and approaches, we are requesting funding as part of the professional services budget for a consultant to complete the zoning ordinance update. Several chapters haven't been updated since 1978. There is some archaic language and outdated uses in the code. Our goal is actually to create a unified development code. This would combine our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance into one document. Developers, builders, and residents would then search for information in one ordinance, thereby streamlining their initial research and plan preparation, while also reducing redundancy in our village's ordinances. Are there any questions on that? I think Todd is going to elaborate on the financial aspect of that under the professional services budget. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to, under the short-term goals, this year we implemented our current development map. It's found on the village's website. It identifies projects that are currently within the plan review process, approved by the board, or currently under construction. Residents can be informed of the upcoming projects, where they will be occurring, their status in the review process, and any upcoming public hearings. I know this map has been utilized by several homeowners associations. They have told me so. They have referenced it on their Facebook pages. And in fact, our Fish Transportation Group utilized it when they were preparing the research for the West Bartlett Road traffic study. So I'm glad it's being utilized. Moving on. Todd, I'm on page 3. Under the implementation for the transit-oriented development plan, the redevelopment of the streets of Bartlett continues, with our department fast-tracking all build-outs in the center. The recommendation for more attractive screening for the MWRD utility site at Devine and Berteau has been completed. That vinyl fence now screens the utilities, and we hope the landscaping gets put in this spring. We've had Site E plans for the 104-unit apartment complex submitted. We've reviewed those, sent those to the developer, and we are waiting for their revisions back to the staff. And a grant has also been awarded to the village for a bike shelter adjacent to the metro station, which would fulfill a TOD recommendation to expand bike parking throughout downtown. Moving on to the update of our permit tracking system. So weekly meetings have been taking place with the planners, IT, and OpenGov every Wednesday since August. We have created a new general building permit application along with workflows, forms, attachments, documents, all associated with this new application. We have GIS and IT have sent addresses and the historical permit data for integration into the new system. And we have also developed express permit applications, and this is something new. These applications can be completed entirely online. They can be paid for online. And if all of the parameters are met within that application form, a building permit will automatically be generated and emailed to the resident or applicant without ever having to come into the village hall. Required inspections will be listed on that permit. The permit will be required to be placed in a window or a visible area. And when the last inspection is approved by the inspector, it will automatically generate a certificate of completion that will be emailed to the applicant. So you're probably all wondering, when is this going to happen? And we plan to go live with this system, cross your fingers, mid-March, so very soon.
Good job.
We are currently training our staff right now.
Okay.
So we've been very busy. Does anybody have any questions on that permit tracking system?
Municipalities, do you think have that in our area?
As OpenGov has told me, well, we were the first with OpenGov in Illinois, with this particular group. However, because COVID, they are being bombarded with applications for permit tracking systems now online, and I'm so thankful that we planned ahead and got in here, because we are a priority now. So we will be up and running within weeks. Yeah. Moving on Todd, I'm going to move on to page 6. With COVID, we've had weekly tech staff meetings now held virtually, both internally and with developers, and it's been a very effective tool over the past year, and it's really improved our staff's time and efficiency. We continue to work with potential developers at the property at 59 and Lake Street, and staff is currently working on creating a plat of subdivision that's going to produce the legal descriptions that are needed for our contract purchasers on this property. On page 7, we continue to work with Crown Community Development and have begun to review potential possibilities for a multi-use path that would provide a crossing under Route 59. And this would coordinate with their overall development and their multi-use path system for this residential development. I will tell you it's very preliminary at this time. We need to evaluate the engineering. We have asked for a lot more information, but it's promising.
Is a tunnel under way less expensive than an over?
We're not calling it a tunnel, we're calling it a path.
Okay.
Right now, a lot less expensive. But they are open to it. Again, it's going to require us reaching out to other jurisdictions, but it is promising because Crown owns development or property both on the east side and the west side. So, you know, we're bringing that up to them. We're in the negotiation stages, and we continue to meet with them quite often.
And coordinating that with the Park District as well, so that there's, you know, connectivity on both sides.
Great, thanks. Some of our highlights for the year have been, we completed the 2020 building code. This past year, over $105 million worth of improvements were reviewed by and approved by our department, and that's over $96 million from last year. So we've been very busy. We created the temporary outdoor dining guidelines, brochure, checklist, and permits within a matter of days. The fair housing ordinance was passed. This year, inspections in our department increased by over 1,249. That averages out to over 100 inspections, additional inspections per month over last year with the same group of people. And then finally, the second 400,000 square foot building in Cook County in the Brewster Creek Business Park is currently under construction. We received the building permit, the large building permit fee yesterday. So with that, I will move on to our Planning Development Services summary. There are no changes in personnel, so if you have any questions, you can stop me, but I'm going to just move on. Our activity measures, I don't really need to go into any detail unless you have a specific question on that. You can see our building inspections have increased each year. Any questions? There are no personnel requests on page 11 and no new equipment on page 12. Our professional development continues basically the same as last year and primarily is for our certified staff to continue their education and acquire the credits that are needed to maintain that certification. There are no new professional development requirements here, and if you have any questions, I will try to answer those. And the same goes for our details, for our professional association details. Are there any questions on those? On our expenditure sheet on page 17, Todd, I can go over a few of those items. Of note is the service agreements. You'll see that it shows an increase of 553%. That is with our new permit tracking system software maintenance agreement, which is $28,810. So Normally, our service agreement is just for the copying machine, which is around $5,000. But when you add in the permit tracking system, it's gone up to $33,000. Next, the increase, we have a slight increase of 7% in our legal notices. That's because development is continuing to increase. Vehicle maintenance, we have increased 9%, and again, that's just due to the aging of the vehicles. And with that, I'm pretty much done. Any questions?
When do you anticipate having the Unified Development Code completed?
Well, that's a good question. It's going to be sort of, and Todd's got, there's phasing involved in that with the budget.
Yeah, it's a, as you know, a big project and a big ticket item. So we anticipate beginning in this fiscal year, but carrying it on into the next fiscal year to finish. There are how many chapters we need to complete, Bert? I think we only had five.
But, right. We received an LTA grant for a parking chapter and a lighting chapter, which will help, and I think help reduce costs. We're going to also try to reach out and find any grants that we can.
And one of the nice things about kind of taking a holistic view of this is, you know, we've talked many times about our parking requirements and getting those up to the appropriate decade, and looking at our lighting requirements. Again, getting them to the appropriate decade so that they are reflective of energy savings and the different kinds of lighting that we have available. You know, have you guys having been, or some of you having been through some of that review process, it can be very technical and time consuming to parse each of those words, making sure that the code is doing what we want it to do, but also is clear for those who are using it. And I think the push to put them into one document will be a very important step for us, because there are numerous times when we will have an architect or an engineer or someone in the development process only look at one.
Right.
So then we, you know, then have 3 pages of comments that then have to, you know, cross over the two. So I think it will be a arduous process, but one that I think we will benefit greatly from once it's complete. But I don't want to give any promises about it being a quick process.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Don't have anything else for Bert.
Anything?
I want to ask you if you would like to continue the admin.
What does everybody think? What do we have next time?
Let's, call it a night.
What I would suggest is that maybe we start, well, if you have 3 meetings to go through, I might suggest that we start a little bit earlier. Is that amenable, like a 6 o'clock start?
Yeah, for you new folks, sometimes we do that. We get like a dinner here, and then we'll start earlier, and then you're not like done glassy-eyed by the end of the deal. So I think it would be a good idea to move administration. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
I hate to say, Bert, it was more exciting information, I think, Chief. So. I don't know if it's just the planning and business side of me or whatever. Thank you. Thank you for presenting. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Danny, seconded by Trustee Sawanski. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Carbonaro?
Yes.
Danny?
Yes.
Gansey?
Yes.
Hopkins? Ranky? Yes. Swansky?
Yes.
We are adjourned.